Hey there. Tonight, we're going to walk together. Not literally, of course, unless you're already in bed with excellent posture, which I would not recommend. No, tonight we're going to walk through history, through legend, through mountain passes and endless golden plains, through medieval villages with cobblestone streets and ancient churches whose bells have been ringing for 1,000 years. We're walking the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James, one of the oldest pilgrimage routes in the Western world, and a path that has drawn millions of travelers to a single destination for over a millennium. This is a journey that begins with a mysterious starlight over a forgotten field in 9th century Spain and ends at the edge of the known world, where ancient peoples once believed the sun went to die each evening. It's a story of faith, of endurance, of blistered feet and unexpected friendships, of medieval monks writing the world's first travel guides, and modern wanderers seeking something they can't quite name. So before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy what we do here on this channel. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love knowing who's joining us from across the world. Now, settle in, get comfortable. Maybe pull the blankets up a little higher. Dim the lights if you haven't already, and let's walk this ancient road together. The Camino de Santiago. In Spanish, the words simply mean the Way of St. James. But that simple translation hardly captures what this path has meant to the people who have walked it since the early Middle Ages. Picture, if you can, a network of routes spreading across Europe like the branches of an ancient tree, all converging on a single point in the far northwestern corner of Spain. From France and Portugal, from England and Germany, from as far away as Scandinavia and the distant reaches of Eastern Europe, pilgrims have traveled these paths for over 1,000 years, all heading toward one destination: the city of Santiago de Compostela, where, according to tradition, the remains of St. James the Apostle lie entombed beneath a magnificent cathedral. But the Camino is far more than a religious pilgrimage, though it certainly began as one. It has been a medieval highway of culture, commerce, and ideas. It has been a refuge for the lost and a challenge for the adventurous. It has been a place where kings and peasants walked the same dusty roads, where languages mixed and merged, where the great Romanesque and Gothic churches of Spain rose up to shelter travelers from distant lands. And today, in our modern age of jet planes and instant communication, people still walk it. They walk it by the hundreds of thousands each year, arriving in Santiago footsore and sun-weathered, many with tears in their eyes, having completed a journey that somehow feels both ancient and urgently personal. Imagine setting out from your home, wherever that might be. Medieval pilgrims did not start their journey at some convenient trailhead. They began at their own doorsteps, walking first through familiar territory before venturing into the unknown. A peasant from Normandy might walk for weeks just to reach the French starting points. A merchant from Bruges would cross half of France before even beginning the mountain passes. The pilgrimage was a complete transformation of ordinary life, a stepping away from everything known and comfortable into a world of uncertainty, hardship, and profound possibility. To understand why this particular path has held such power over the human imagination for so long, we need to go back to the very beginning. Back to a time of legend, of angels and starlight, of a fisherman from Galilee who would become the patron saint of Spain and give his name to one of the world's most famous journeys. The legend of Saint James. Our story begins not in Spain, but in a small fishing village on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, sometime in the 1st century of the Common Era. There lived a man named James, the son of Zebedee, brother to John, and a fisherman by trade. According to the Gospels, James and his brother were among the very first disciples called by Jesus of Nazareth, chosen while they sat mending their nets by the water's edge. The scene is easy to imagine. The morning light on the water, the smell of fish and salt, the nets spread out for repair, and then a stranger approaching with an invitation that would change everything. "Follow me," he said, and they did. James would become one of the 3 disciples closest to Jesus, present at the most significant moments of his ministry, from the Transfiguration on Mount Tabor to the Garden of Gethsemane. The Gospels give us glimpses of his character, ambitious perhaps, asking with his brother for positions of honor in the coming kingdom. Passionate enough to be nicknamed by Jesus, along with John, as Sons of Thunder. He was a man of fire and conviction, qualities that would serve the early church well in the years to come. After the crucifixion and the events that followed, tradition holds that the apostles scattered across the known world to spread their message. And according to Spanish legend, a legend so old that its origins have been lost to time, James travelled to the Iberian Peninsula to preach in what was then a remote corner of the Roman Empire. The historical evidence for this journey is thin at best, and many scholars doubt it ever occurred. But in matters of legend and faith, historical evidence is often beside the point. What matters is what people believed and what they built upon those beliefs. James, the story goes, spent several years evangelizing in Spain with limited success. The peninsula was thoroughly Roman at the time, its inhabitants worshipping the familiar gods of the classical world, and the message of a crucified Galilean carpenter did not find easy purchase. Some accounts say he made only 9 converts during his entire time in Spain. One of these was a woman named Lupa, a queen who ruled in Galicia, who would play a crucial role in the events to come. But the mission seemed, by worldly standards, a failure. And then came a vision. While praying on the banks of the Ebro River, near what is now the city of Zaragoza, James saw the Virgin Mary appear before him, standing atop a pillar of jasper. She encouraged him in his mission and prophesied that faith would flourish in this land after his death. The site of this apparition became the Basilica of Our Lady of the Pillar, one of the most important Marian shrines in the Catholic world, and a reminder that James's connection to Spain goes deeper than his burial. Called by this vision, or perhaps by more mundane concerns, James eventually returned to Jerusalem. There, sometime between 41 and 44 CE, according to most historical estimates, he met his end at the hands of King Herod Agrippa, becoming the first of the 12 apostles to suffer martyrdom. He was beheaded with a sword, which is why the cross of St. James is shaped like a sword to this day. You can find it throughout Spain, painted on walls and carved into stone, a reminder of how the saint met his fate. The Book of Acts records his death in a single verse, a brevity that somehow makes the event more rather than less powerful. But this is where legend truly begins to weave its magic. According to the old stories, the disciples of James placed his body in a small boat, a boat made of stone in some tellings, and entrusted it to the sea. Guided by angels, or perhaps by the hand of Providence itself, the boat carried the saint's remains across the Mediterranean, around the coast of Portugal, and finally to the shores of Galicia in northwestern Spain. The journey was impossibly swift, covering in 7 days a distance that should have taken months. The body was brought ashore near the town now called Padron. The name itself derived from the Latin word for the stone mooring post where the miraculous vessel was tied. And here, Queen Lupa, the convert James had made during his missionary years, re-enters the story. Though scholars note that such details are part of tradition rather than documented history. At first, according to the legend, she tried to trick the disciples, sending them to fetch oxen from a mountain where a dragon was known to dwell. But the disciples made the sign of the cross, the dragon died, and the wild bulls that roamed the mountain were miraculously tamed. Convinced at last of the power of this new faith, Lupa converted fully and gave the disciples a place on her own land to bury their master. In a forest clearing not far from the coast, the disciples raised a small mausoleum over the site, said their prayers, and passed from history. Centuries rolled by. The Roman Empire rose and fell. Germanic tribes swept across the peninsula. The Visigoths established their kingdoms, and then they too were swept away when Islamic armies crossed from North Africa in 711 and conquered most of Iberia within just a few years. Through it all, the tomb of St. James lay forgotten in its forest clearing, lost to memory, reclaimed by the wild. Trees grew over it. The stone walls crumbled. The local people, if any remained, forgot what lay beneath the tangled growth. Then, according to traditional accounts, sometime around the year 820, a hermit named Pelayo, who lived in the small settlement of San Fis de Solovio, noticed something strange in the night sky. Lights were flickering over a nearby hillside, strange illuminations that seemed to hover and dance above the trees. Night after night, Pelayo watched these mysterious lights, and finally, guided by curiosity, or perhaps by faith, he set out to discover their source. What he found, according to the ancient accounts, was an overgrown clearing, and, within it, a forgotten tomb containing 3 bodies. Pelayo reported his discovery to Theodemar, the bishop of the nearby diocese of Iria Flavia, who came to investigate. And the bishop, examining the remains in the tomb, made a momentous declaration. This, he proclaimed, was the long-lost burial place of St. James the Greater, Apostle of Christ, brought to these shores in the centuries after his martyrdom. How the bishop arrived at this conclusion remains unclear. The details are lost in the mists of medieval record-keeping, and modern scholars remain deeply skeptical about the identification. Some have suggested the bones were actually those of Priscillian, a 4th century bishop executed for heresy, whose followers may have brought his remains to Galicia. Others propose that the tomb was deliberately created or retrofitted to bolster the Christian kingdom's claims against their Muslim rivals. But what matters is what happened next. Word was sent to King Alfonso, the second of Asturias, the small Christian kingdom clinging to the mountains of northern Spain, while Islamic caliphates controlled everything to the south. Alfonso came to see for himself, and he confirmed the bishop's declaration. He ordered a small chapel built over the tomb, and, in doing so, set in motion events that would shape European history for 1,000 years. The discovery of the apostles' remains was not merely a religious event, it was a political one, providing a powerful symbol around which the Christian resistance to Muslim rule could rally. The place where Pelayo saw the mysterious lights came to be known as the Field of Stars, Campus Stellae in Latin, which evolved over time into the name we know today, Compostela. And the city that grew up around that humble chapel became Santiago de Compostela, the final destination of what would become one of Christianity's 3 great pilgrimages, alongside Jerusalem and Rome. King Alfonso himself is considered the first true pilgrim, having travelled from his capital in Oviedo to venerate the relics. The path he walked, roughly 320 kilometers through the rugged mountains of Asturias, is now known as the Camino Primitivo, the original way, the oldest of all the routes to Santiago. The medieval pilgrimage. In the centuries that followed the discovery of the tomb, the pilgrimage to Santiago grew from a local devotion into a continent-spanning phenomenon. Medieval people, you see, thought about the world in ways quite different from our own. They lived in a cosmos saturated with spiritual significance, where the boundary between the visible and invisible worlds was thin and permeable. Saints were not distant historical figures, but active presences, capable of interceding with the divine, of performing miracles, of protecting and healing those who sought their aid. And relics, the physical remains of holy persons, were objects of immense power. A piece of bone, a fragment of cloth, a vial of dust from a saint's tomb. These things were believed to be channels of divine grace, capable of curing illness, forgiving sins, and guaranteeing a favorable judgment in the afterlife. The body of an apostle, someone who had walked with Christ himself, was a relic of unparalleled importance, and the claim that one such body lay in the far corner of Spain drew the faithful from across Europe like iron filings to a magnet. Churches and cathedrals competed fiercely for prestigious relics, understanding that the possession of a famous saint's remains meant a steady stream of pilgrims, and with them, donations, prestige, and economic vitality. The arrival of St. James's relics transformed Santiago from an obscure settlement on the edge of nowhere into one of the most important cities in Christendom. This transformation was not accidental. It was actively promoted by church authorities and secular rulers who understood the power of sacred geography. But why walk such enormous distances when simply praying at your local church might seem sufficient? For medieval Christians, the journey itself was the point. Pilgrimage was an act of penance, a way of atoning for sins through physical suffering and self-denial. The Church taught that through pilgrimage, believers could earn indulgences, reductions in the punishment due for their sins, either in this life or in the mysterious suffering of purgatory that awaited after death. A pilgrimage to one of the three great shrines, Jerusalem, Rome, or Santiago, could earn a plenary indulgence, the complete remission of all temporal punishment. In an age when the fear of hell was vivid and immediate, this was no small thing. The theology of pilgrimage was sophisticated and carefully developed. Pilgrims were understood to be imitating Christ, who had wandered homeless during his ministry, and the apostles, who had traveled the known world to spread the gospel. The hardships of the journey were not unfortunate side effects, but essential features, mortifications of the flesh that purified the soul. To walk 1,000 kilometers with bleeding feet and an aching back was to share, in a small way, the sufferings of the saints and martyrs. And at the end of that suffering waited the possibility of transformation, of returning home a different and better person than the one who had set out. And so they walked. Kings and queens walked to Santiago to give thanks for victories or to pray for heirs. Criminals walked it as an alternative to harsher punishments, their pilgrimage a form of exile and penance combined. The sick walked in hope of miraculous healing, trusting that the apostle would intercede for them with God. The grieving walked to pray for departed souls, believing their loved ones might be released sooner from purgatory's flames. The guilty walked to ease their consciences, seeking absolution for sins that weighed heavy on their hearts. And many simply walked because it was what one did. A great adventure sanctioned by faith. A chance to see the world beyond the village where one was born and would likely die. The journey was not easy. From Paris to Santiago is roughly 1,500 kilometers, a journey of 2 to 3 months, on foot for the average pilgrim. From more distant points, the walk could take half a year or more. Pilgrims faced bandits on lonely mountain roads, wolves in the forests, rivers that had to be forded without bridges, and innkeepers who overcharged and underdelivered at every opportunity. Disease was a constant companion, with pilgrims crowded together in hospices and hostels where illness spread easily. The food was often terrible, the water of questionable safety, and the weather showed no respect for pious intentions. Many who set out never returned, dying along the way from illness, accident, or simple exhaustion. Their graves dot the landscape of northern Spain, anonymous markers of journeys that ended short of their destination. Yet the infrastructure to support pilgrims grew steadily. Monasteries and churches along the routes offered hospitality, sometimes free, sometimes for a modest donation. The great monastic orders, particularly the Benedictines of Cluny, established hospices at regular intervals, understanding that the welfare of pilgrims was both a spiritual duty and a sound investment in their own prestige. Bridges were built to ease dangerous river crossings, their construction considered a charitable act that earned merit in heaven. The famous bridge at Puente la Reina, built in the 11th century to help pilgrims cross the River Arga, still stands today, its Romanesque arches testament to medieval engineering and medieval faith. Hospitals, in the medieval sense of houses, offering hospitality rather than medical care, sprung up in towns along the way. These establishments, often run by religious orders, provided beds, meals, and basic care for the endless stream of travelers. Some specialized in treating the sick. Others, focus simply on providing shelter for a night or two. Entire communities grew wealthy from the pilgrim traffic, their economies built around providing food, lodging, and supplies to the endless stream of travelers. Towns competed to attract pilgrims, knowing that a reputation for good hospices and honest merchants would bring more visitors and more wealth. And in the early 1100s, someone had the brilliant idea of writing it all down. The Codex Calixtinus, compiled around 1140 and attributed, somewhat dubiously, to Pope Calixtus II, is essentially the world's first travel guidebook. This remarkable manuscript, preserved to this day in the Cathedral of Santiago, contains 5 books covering everything from liturgical texts, honoring Saint James, to miracle stories demonstrating his power to intervene in the lives of the faithful. Its 5th book, thought to have been written by a French cleric named Émeric Picaud, describes the routes through France and Spain, offers advice on where to find clean water, warns about dishonest locals, describes the customs of various regions, and provides detailed accounts of the churches and relics to be visited along the way. Some of his opinions were, shall we say, uncharitable. He had particularly harsh words for the Basques and Navarrese, whom he accused of all manner of unsavory behavior, from overcharging pilgrims to customs that a refined French cleric found shocking. Perhaps he had a bad experience crossing the Pyrenees, or perhaps he simply suffered from the common medieval prejudice that anyone who was not French was probably suspicious. But despite its biases, the Codex established something crucial. It codified the idea that there were specific routes to follow, specific places where pilgrims should stop, specific experiences that defined the journey. The Camino was no longer just a destination. It was a path with its own identity, its own traditions, its own meaning. The Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. At the end of all those dusty roads and mountain paths, standing in the heart of the city that grew up around the Apostles' tomb, rises one of the great buildings of medieval Christianity, the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. To stand before it, as countless pilgrims have done over the centuries, is to confront something beyond ordinary architecture. The current structure began its life in 1075, commissioned during the height of the pilgrimage's popularity, and it took over a century to complete. Construction began with the apse, the eastern end where the main altar stands, and worked gradually westward, incorporating the latest architectural innovations of the Romanesque style. The building is constructed from the local granite, a grey stone that catches the light in subtle ways, sometimes seeming almost silver in the morning, golden in the afternoon, and softly luminous in the hours after rain. It rises from the great square of Obradoiro, its western facade an explosion of Baroque exuberance added in the 1700s. Twin towers reaching 75 meters into the Galician sky. The name of this square, Obradoiro, means workshop in Galician, a reference to the stonemasons who labored here for generations, shaping granite into grace. But behind that dramatic facade, the bones of the Romanesque original remain. Massive walls thick enough to withstand siege, round arches marching down the nave, the barrel vault overhead, supported by transverse arches that divide the ceiling into rhythmic sections. The floor plan follows the standard cruciform pattern of great medieval churches, but with an important addition: a wide ambulatory running behind the main altar, allowing pilgrims to circulate around the tomb without disturbing services in the nave. This practical accommodation of pilgrim traffic influenced church architecture throughout Europe. But the true treasure of the cathedral, the element that scholars and pilgrims alike travel vast distances to see, is the Portico della Gloria, the Portico of Glory. Completed in 1188 by a master sculptor known simply as Matteo, this triple-arched doorway is one of the great achievements of Romanesque art. Over 200 figures populate its columns and archways: prophets and apostles, angels and elders, demons and the saved, all gathered around the central figure of Christ in majesty. The detail is extraordinary. Faces expressing every shade of human emotion from bliss to terror, drapery falling in natural folds, musical instruments carved with such precision that musicologists have studied them to understand medieval performance practice. Saint James himself sits on the central pillar, depicted as a pilgrim with his staff and his scallop shell, greeting those who have walked so far to reach him. Above him, angels hold the instruments of Christ's passion: the cross, the crown of thorns, the nails, and spear. Below, a twisting vine grows from the figure of Jesse, showing Christ's royal lineage. The whole composition is a symphony in stone, a visual sermon preaching salvation to the illiterate pilgrims who could not read the scriptures, but could understand the message carved before them. For centuries, pilgrims arriving at the cathedral would place their hand on the tree of Jesse carved into that central pillar, a gesture of arrival and thanksgiving repeated so many times that 5 deep finger grooves have been worn into the marble. They would then lean forward and touch their forehead to the figure of Matteo himself, carved kneeling at the base, seeking some of the brilliance that allowed him to create such beauty. These touching traditions were eventually stopped to preserve the artwork, but the worn marble remains as evidence of the millions who came before. Standing before the portico today, you can see those finger grooves and know that your hand would fit perfectly into the space worn by countless hands across the centuries. Below the main altar, reached by a narrow staircase, lies the crypt where the remains attributed to Saint James rest in a silver casket. The space is small and intimate, forcing pilgrims to bow as they enter, a physical act of reverence that seems entirely appropriate. Pilgrims file through in quiet reverence, their long journey finally concluded. Some weep, some pray, some simply stand in silence, unable or unwilling to articulate what the moment means to them. Above them, in the cathedral proper, masses are celebrated throughout the day, and at the Pilgrims' Mass, something extraordinary sometimes occurs: the Botafumeiro. The name means smoke expeller in Galician, and it is one of the largest thuribles, or incense burners, in the world. Weighing over 80 kilograms and standing over 1.5 meters tall, it hangs from a system of pulleys attached to the transept crossing. On special occasions, 8 men, called tiraboleiros, pull on ropes to set it swinging. The coordination required is remarkable. Each man must pull at precisely the right moment, adding energy to the pendulum with every swing. building momentum until the massive brass vessel is arcing through the cathedral's crossing in a trajectory that seems impossibly grand. The Botafumeiro rises nearly to the ceiling, trailing thick clouds of fragrant smoke, moving so fast that at the apex of its swing, it reaches speeds of up to 68 kilometers per hour. The effect is extraordinary, hypnotic, otherworldly. The clouds of incense, the ancient chanting, the swaying of that massive silver vessel. It feels like something from another age, which of course it is. Visitors who witness it often describe a sense of time collapsing, of standing in the same space and experiencing the same ritual that pilgrims experienced 500 years ago. The origins of this practice are practical as much as spiritual. Medieval pilgrims, after weeks or months on the road, arrived at the cathedral in states of hygiene that would alarm modern sensibilities. They had walked through mud and dust, slept in crowded hostels, sweated through summer heat, and shivered through winter rains, all without access to regular bathing. The incense helped mask the accumulated aromas of the faithful, making the cathedral's interior bearable for extended services. But over time, the Botafumeiro became its own ritual, a spectacular punctuation mark at the end of the long journey, a sensory experience that pilgrims would remember for the rest of their lives. Walking the Camino Francis. Of all the routes to Santiago, one has become synonymous with the pilgrimage itself. The Camino Frances, the French way, stretches roughly 790 kilometers from the small town of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in the French Pyrenees to the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. It crosses 4 distinct regions of northern Spain, each with its own landscape, its own character, its own challenges and rewards. If you were to walk it, as over 60% of modern pilgrims do, this is what you would experience. The journey begins in the mountains. Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port is a medieval fortress town at the foot of the Pyrenees, its walls and gates still intact. Its narrow streets lined with white houses, bearing red shutters and geranium-filled window boxes. The name means St. John at the foot of the pass, a reference to the mountain crossing that awaits. The town has been welcoming pilgrims for centuries, and it knows its business well. The pilgrim office here issues credentials, those folded documents that serve as pilgrim passports, and offers advice on weather conditions and route options. Local shops sell everything a pilgrim might need, from walking poles to blister treatment to emergency rain gear. From here, 2 routes cross the mountain pass into Spain. The high route, called the Napoleon route, climbs through alpine meadows and across windswept ridges, offering stunning views when the weather cooperates and genuine danger when it doesn't. The ascent is steep and demanding, rising over 1,400 meters in a single day. In clear weather, the panorama from the pass is breathtaking, peaks stretching in every direction, valleys green and misty far below, and the endless rolling hills of Spain visible in the distance. In bad weather, the same route becomes a serious test. With fog so thick, you can barely see the path, winds strong enough to knock a tired walker off balance, and temperatures that can drop precipitously, even in summer. In winter and early spring, this pass is closed entirely due to snow and ice. The low route follows the valley through Valcarlos, less dramatic, but more sheltered. Either way, you descend into the monastery of Roncesvalles, where Charlemagne's rearguard was famously ambushed in 778, an event immortalized in the Song of Roland. The historical battle was likely a Basque attack on the retreating Frankish army, revenge for Charlemagne's destruction of Pamplona's walls. But legend transformed it into a heroic last stand against Saracen hordes, with the knight Roland blowing his horn so loudly that his temples burst as he died. The monastery has offered shelter to pilgrims for almost 1,000 years, and sleeping in its ancient hostel, in rooms where medieval travelers once rested their weary bodies, provides an immediate and visceral connection to the pilgrimage's history. The path then winds through the green hills and mist-shrouded valleys of Navarre, past medieval villages with houses built from the local golden stone, through the streets of Pamplona, famous for its running of the bulls each July, but equally worthy of exploration any time of year. Pamplona's cathedral, dedicated to Santa Maria, houses the tomb of King Charles III of Navarre and his queen, one of the finest Gothic tombs in Spain. The old town, with its narrow streets and wide plazas, invites wandering. The fortress walls that once held back invaders now frame peaceful parks where pilgrims rest their feet and watch children play. After Navarre comes La Rioja, and the landscape shifts. Here are the vineyards, endless rows of grapevines stretching to the horizon, producing the renowned wines that bear the region's name. The vines march in orderly ranks across gently rolling hills, their leaves changing color with the seasons, bright green in spring, deep green in summer, gold and red in autumn before the harvest. The path passes through towns like Logroño, where pilgrims gather in the evening to stroll the tapas streets, sampling small dishes of grilled peppers, cured ham, and local cheeses, washed down with glasses of Rioja's ruby red vintage. The walking here is gentler, the terrain rolling rather than mountainous, the air often carrying hints of fermenting grapes. The town of Santo Domingo de la Calzada deserves special mention. Named for a saint who dedicated his life to helping pilgrims, building bridges and roads and hospices to ease their journey, it preserves one of the strangest traditions on the entire Camino. In the cathedral, a white rooster and a white hen live in an ornate Gothic chicken coop, their presence commemorating a medieval miracle tale still beloved today. The legend tells that a young man, falsely accused of theft by an innkeeper's daughter he had rejected, was hanged in the town square. His grieving parents continued to Santiago, and on their return, found their son still alive on the gallows, supported by the saint. When they reported this to the local judge, who was about to eat his dinner, he scoffed that their son was no more alive than the roasted chickens on his plate. At which point, according to the story, the chickens jumped up and began to crow. The birds in the cathedral today are descended, symbolically if not biologically, from those miraculous fowl. Then comes the Meseta, and everything changes. The Meseta is the high central plateau of Spain, a vast expanse of flat or gently undulating land that stretches from roughly Burgos to Leon, some 200 kilometers of what many pilgrims find to be the most challenging part of the journey. Not because the terrain is difficult, far from it. The challenge is psychological. The Meseta is big sky country, an ocean of wheat fields and sunflower farms beneath an enormous dome of blue. Villages are far apart, sometimes 20 or 30 kilometers between places to rest. shade is scarce. The path stretches arrow straight toward a horizon that never seems to get closer. There is little to distract the mind from its own thoughts, little to focus on but the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel and the slow passage of clouds overhead. In summer, the heat can be brutal, the temperature climbing toward 40 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day. In winter, bitter winds sweep across the plateau, finding every gap in clothing, numbing fingers and faces. Spring and autumn are gentler, but even then, the Meseta demands respect. Some pilgrims find it unbearable, a test of will rather than a pleasure to be savoured. They hurry through, covering longer distances each day just to reach the other side. Others discover something unexpected in its emptiness, a meditative quality, a space where the noise of daily life falls away and something quieter emerges. Many report that the Meseta is where the deepest inner work of the pilgrimage occurs, where whatever brought them to the Camino in the first place finally demands to be examined. Burgos and León bracket this great emptiness, two of Spain's most magnificent cities. Burgos boasts a Gothic cathedral so ornately decorated that it seems to be made of frozen lace rather than stone. Construction began in 1221 and continued for centuries, with each generation adding their own embellishments until the whole building became a museum of Gothic ornamentation. The lantern tower over the crossing, with its star-shaped vault, is considered one of the masterpieces of European architecture. El Cid, the legendary medieval warrior, is buried here, his tomb a place of pilgrimage in its own right. León offers both its own stunning cathedral, famous for its medieval stained glass, over 1,800 square meters of windows that transform the interior into a kaleidoscope of colored light, and examples of architecture by Antoni Gaudí, whose fantastical modernist style seems wildly out of place, and yet somehow perfectly at home. The Casa Botines, with its castellated towers and Gothic arches, reimagined through Gaudí's unique vision, stands in the city centre, like a visitor from another dimension. León was once the capital of a medieval kingdom, and its streets still echo with that royal heritage. Grand plazas, ancient convents, the remains of Roman walls built when this was a legionary fortress called Legio. After León, the path climbs again into the mountains of the El Bierzo region and eventually up to the village of Ochebrero, perched high in the ranges that separate the plains of Castile from the green hills of Galicia. This crossing is often challenging, with significant elevation gain and sometimes fierce weather, but the reward is immediate. Ochebrero preserves palozas, traditional thatched stone houses of pre-Roman origin, their circular walls and conical roofs unchanged since Celtic times. A church in the village holds what tradition claims is another miracle relic, a chalice and paten said to have been involved in a medieval Eucharistic miracle, when, as the story goes, consecrated bread and wine transformed visibly into flesh and blood before the eyes of a doubting priest and a devout peasant. Galicia, the final region of the Camino, feels like a different country entirely. Lush and green, misty and mysterious, with stone villages and ancient granaries, eucalyptus forests, and small farms where cattle graze on impossibly steep hillsides. The Atlantic influence softens the air, brings frequent rain, and paints everything in shades of emerald and moss. The Galician language, related to Portuguese, appears on signs and is heard in conversations, a reminder that Spain contains many nations and many cultures. The path here winds through forests, past tiny chapels, across streams on ancient stone bridges. The sense of approaching journey's end begins to build. The final days of the Camino pass through this gentle landscape, the path winding through woodlands and past tiny churches, the yellow arrows and scallop shell markers pointing ever westward. And then, usually from atop Monte de Gozo, the Mount of Joy, pilgrims catch their first glimpse of the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, its twin towers rising from the city below. It is a moment that has reduced countless travelers to tears, the culmination of weeks or months of walking, of blisters healed and muscles strengthened, of doubts overcome and friendships forged. The name Monte de Gozo captures the emotion perfectly. This is where joy begins, where the long approach finally yields to arrival. Finisterre, the end of the world. But for many pilgrims, Santiago de Compostela is not quite the end. Another journey awaits, a continuation of the ancient path that predates Christianity itself, leading to a place called Finisterre, the end of the earth. This rocky peninsula, jutting into the Atlantic Ocean, was, for the Romans and the Celtic peoples who preceded them, the westernmost point of the known world. Beyond it lay only the mysterious vastness of the Mare Tenebrosum, the Sea of Darkness, where the sun was believed to die each evening, sinking into waters from which no ship had ever returned. Long before anyone had heard of St. James, long before the Christian faith reached these shores, people were drawn to this place. The Celts, who inhabited Galicia, known to the Romans as the Galaici, built sacred sites along this dramatic coastline. On the mountain called Monte Faccio, at the very tip of Cape Finisterre, they constructed an altar called the Ara Solis, the altar of the sun. Here they performed rituals honoring the setting sun, watching in awe as the great fire of heaven descended into what appeared to be an infinite abyss of water. For a people who worshipped nature's forces, there could be no more powerful or terrifying place. The religion of these Celtic peoples was animistic, finding spirit and power in the natural world. Trees, rivers, mountains, and the heavenly bodies all possessed divine significance. The sun was perhaps the most important of these powers, the source of warmth and light and life itself. To watch that sun sink beneath the western waters, to stand at the very edge of the world as darkness rose from the sea, was to witness a daily miracle and a daily death. Small wonder that they built altars here, conducted ceremonies, and treated this place as sacred ground. When the Romans conquered the region, they did not erase these beliefs but incorporated them, as was their custom. Archaeological evidence suggests they recognized the spiritual power of the site and established their own shrine to Berebreus, a deity associated with the otherworld and beyond. The very name Finisterre comes from their language, Finis Terrae, literally the end of the land. One can imagine Roman legions standing on these cliffs, staring westward at an ocean that their maps showed as the absolute boundary of the world. Beyond this point lay only the edge of the known and the beginning of the unknown. Christianity eventually arrived, and the old gods were replaced by new saints. A hermit named San Guillerme reportedly lived on Montefacio, and his presence helped sanctify what had been a pagan site. Churches were built, shrines were converted, and the old rituals were forbidden. But old beliefs die hard, especially in remote places, and the association of Finisterre with endings and beginnings, with death and rebirth, with the boundary between the known and the unknown, persisted through the centuries. Medieval pilgrims who reached Santiago often continued to Finisterre, drawn by the same impulse that drew their pagan predecessors. They collected scallop shells from the beaches, physical proof that they had reached the very edge of the world. Some burned their clothes, the worn and tattered garments that had carried them across a continent, a symbolic destruction of their old selves. They watched the sun set over the Atlantic and contemplated the mysteries that lay beyond the horizon. This was death and resurrection enacted in symbolic form. The old self died at the world's end, and the new self was born to make the journey home. The Costa da Morte, the coast of death, takes its name from this region's dangerous waters. Treacherous currents, hidden rocks, and sudden storms have claimed countless ships over the centuries. The sea here is not gentle or welcoming, but wild and untamed, crashing against cliffs with a violence that reminds visitors how small they are against the forces of nature. Shipwrecks dot the coastal waters, their locations marked on nautical charts as warnings to modern sailors. Lighthouses stand guard at regular intervals, their beams sweeping the darkness, trying to keep vessels from the rocks that have claimed so many before. And yet this fearsome beauty is part of Finisterre's appeal. To stand at the very end of the world, buffeted by Atlantic winds, watching the sun perform its ancient descent into the sea, is to touch something primal and unforgettable. The landscape here is dramatic in ways that peaceful valleys and gentle hills cannot match. Cliffs drop sheer to churning water. Spray explodes against rocks with each breaking wave. Seabirds wheel and cry overhead. The raw power of nature, indifferent to human concerns, demands acknowledgement. Today, a lighthouse marks the cape, its beam warning ships away from the dangerous coastline. Built in 1853, the Faro de Finisterre has guided countless vessels through these treacherous waters. Inside, a small museum tells the history of the lighthouse and the coast it guards. A modern monument displays the 0-kilometer marker, the symbolic end of the Camino for those who have walked beyond Santiago. This concrete marker, simple in design but profound in meaning, has become one of the most photographed spots on the entire pilgrimage route. Pilgrims gather each evening to watch the sunset, a ritual that has continued, in one form or another, for thousands of years. They sit on the rocks, wrapped in blankets against the Atlantic wind, cameras at the ready for the moment when the sun touches the water. The sky turns orange, then red, then purple, the colours reflecting off the clouds in patterns that never repeat exactly. Each sunset is unique, a once-in-a-lifetime event that nonetheless happens every single day. Some pilgrims still burn articles of clothing, though environmental concerns have made this practice less common than it once was. The tradition of burning worn boots, sweaty shirts, or tattered socks symbolises leaving behind the old self that walked those long kilometres. The fire consumes the physical remnants of the journey, and with them, supposedly, the burdens and troubles that the pilgrim carried. Others prefer to leave small offerings at the Cape's many informal shrines, notes, photographs, tokens, and trinkets marking their passage through this significant place. Others simply sit in silence, contemplating the journey that brought them here, the end that is also a beginning. The walk from Santiago to Finisterre takes 3 to 4 days, adding another 90 kilometers to an already long journey. Those who make this extra effort often describe it as essential to their experience, the true completion of something that began weeks or months earlier. Without Finisterre, they say, the Camino would feel somehow unfinished, a story missing its final chapter. Symbols, traditions, and the scallop shell. If you were to walk the Camino today, you would quickly notice certain symbols appearing over and over again, painted on walls and trees, carved into stone pillars, displayed on ceramic tiles and metal signs. These markers guide pilgrims along paths that have been walked for over 1,000 years. And of all these symbols, none is more recognizable, more universally associated with the pilgrimage than the scallop shell. The shell of the Pecten Maximus, the great scallop native to the waters off Galicia, has been connected to St. James and his pilgrimage since the earliest days of the devotion. Its scientific name, Pecten Jacobaeus, literally means Jacob's scallop, using the Latin form of the name, James. But why this particular shell? The answers offered by legend are various and colourful. One story tells of a knight riding along the Galician coast as the boat bearing St. James's body approached the shore. The knight's horse was startled and plunged into the sea, rider and mount both disappearing beneath the waves. When they emerged, miraculously unharmed, both were covered in scallop shells. The knight converted to Christianity on the spot, and the shell became forever associated with the saint's protective power. Another legend connects the shell's distinctive ridged pattern to the many routes that pilgrims follow to reach Santiago, like the grooves of the shell, all converging at a single point. The pilgrim paths cross Europe from every direction, uniting at the Apostles' tomb. The shell becomes a symbol of the pilgrimage itself, of the many journeys that share a common destination. This interpretation has proven especially durable, appearing in guidebooks and pilgrim literature for centuries. A third tradition associates the shell with the goddess Venus, who, according to classical mythology, rose from the sea standing on a scallop shell. Some scholars suggest that the shell's association with fertility and rebirth made it attractive to early pilgrims, some of whom came to Santiago seeking help with conception. Whether this pagan connection actually influenced the shell's adoption as a Christian symbol is unclear, but the possibility adds another layer to its complex meaning. More practically, the shell served a useful purpose for medieval travelers. Its concave shape made it an ideal scoop for drinking water from streams and fountains, and its size was convenient for receiving charitable portions of food. Pilgrims were often given a scoop's worth of grain or porridge from monasteries and hospices along the way, the shell serving as both utensil and measuring cup. Form followed function, as it so often does. Originally, pilgrims acquired their shells upon reaching Santiago, collecting them from the Galician beaches or purchasing them from vendors who quickly sprang up around the cathedral. The shell was proof of completion, a certificate of pilgrimage in an age before paper, credentials. In medieval graves throughout Europe, archaeologists have discovered bodies buried with scallop shells, evidence that the deceased had made the journey to Santiago, a spiritual accomplishment they wished to carry into the afterlife. Today, pilgrims often carry their shells from the beginning of their journey, displayed on backpacks as a visible sign of their intention. The shells serve both as identification, marking their bearers as fellow travelers on the way of St. James, and as waymarkers in their own right. In Spain, the shells painted or carved along the route point towards Santiago, their radiating grooves indicating the direction to travel. In France and other starting countries, the shells point outward, showing the direction from Santiago back toward the pilgrim's origin. Beyond the shell, other symbols mark the modern Camino. The yellow arrows, painted on trees, rocks, walls, and sidewalks, are perhaps the most practical guides. These arrows began appearing in the early 1980s, painted by volunteers working to revive and mark the ancient routes after centuries of decline. A Spanish priest named Elias Valiña San Pedro is credited with starting this tradition, armed with cans of yellow paint and a determination to make the Camino walkable again. Now the arrows are ubiquitous. They're cheerful yellow reassuring pilgrims at every uncertain crossroads that yes, they are still on the path. The credential, or pilgrim passport, is another essential item. This folded document, available from pilgrim organizations and religious institutions, contains spaces for stamps, or cellos, collected at churches, hostels, cafes, and hotels along the way. Each stamp marks a stop on the journey, creating a physical record of the pilgrimage. The stamps themselves are often beautiful, featuring local landmarks, patron saints, or symbolic imagery. Collecting them becomes its own pleasure, a visual diary of the journey. Upon reaching Santiago, pilgrims present their credential at the pilgrim's office, and if they have collected sufficient stamps over at least the final 100 kilometers, they receive the Compostela, the official certificate of pilgrimage completion. Written in Latin, personalized with the pilgrim's name, rendered in its Latin form, the Compostela connects modern travelers to a tradition stretching back to the medieval church. The document declares that the bearer has visited the tomb of St. James, devotionis affectu, voti vel pietatis causa, for devotion, vow, or piety. It is signed, dated, and sealed, a medieval bureaucratic procedure that somehow retains its power to move recipients who have walked hundreds of kilometers to earn it. The modern Camino. For centuries, the pilgrimage to Santiago flourished. At its medieval peak, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims walked the routes each year, their numbers swelling during holy years, when the feast of St. James, July 25th, fell on a Sunday, and special indulgences were available. But nothing lasts forever, and eventually, the tide began to turn. The Protestant Reformation of the 1500s dealt a significant blow. Martin Luther and other reformers rejected the entire concept of indulgences and questioned the veneration of relics, undermining the theological foundations on which pilgrimage rested. Why walk 1,000 kilometers to honor bones of dubious authenticity when salvation came through faith alone? Wars between Catholic Spain and Protestant England, wars with France, waves of plague, the gradual secularization of European society, all contributed to a long decline. By the 1900s, the Camino had dwindled to a trickle. In 1976, just 574 pilgrims received the Compostela. The ancient paths were overgrown, the waymarks forgotten, the hostels closed or repurposed. The revival, when it came, was gradual and organic. A Spanish priest named Elias Valiña San Pedro began marking the French way with yellow arrows in the 1980s, making it possible to follow the route without getting hopelessly lost. Guidebooks appeared, first in Spanish, then in other languages. The European Council designated the Camino as the first European cultural route in 1987, recognizing its historical and cultural significance. UNESCO added the Spanish routes to its World Heritage List in 1993, followed by the French routes in 1998. The 2010 film The Way, starring Martin Sheen and directed by his son Emilio Estevez, introduced the pilgrimage to millions of viewers around the world. The story of a grieving father who walks the Camino to honor his deceased son touched audiences and sparked curiosity about this ancient path. Travel writers, bloggers, and social media users spread the word further, sharing images of misty forests and golden plains, of weary pilgrims and jubilant arrivals. The numbers tell the story of resurrection. In 2024, nearly 500,000 pilgrims received the Compostela, an increase of over 12% from the previous year, and a figure that would have seemed unimaginable just a few decades earlier. The number has doubled since 2015 and increased by over 600% since the turn of the millennium. Every year breaks new records as more and more people discover or rediscover the ancient way of St. James. Who are these modern pilgrims? The statistics reveal a remarkably diverse population. They come from nearly 200 countries, speaking dozens of languages, ranging in age from young children walking with their families to octogenarians completing a lifelong dream. The largest groups come from Spain itself, followed by the United States, which in 2024 became the second most common nationality among Compostela recipients. Germany, Italy, Portugal, France, and South Korea all send substantial numbers. Women now slightly outnumber men, a shift from the male-dominated pilgrimages of the past. About 47% cite purely religious motivations for their journey, while another third describe their reasons as a combination of spiritual and secular. The remainder come for cultural exploration, personal challenge, or simply the adventure of a long walk through beautiful countryside. Most walk, as medieval pilgrims did, though a significant minority cycle, and small numbers arrive on horseback, in wheelchairs, or even by sailboat. The motivations are as varied as the pilgrims themselves. Some come seeking spiritual renewal, a connection to something larger than their daily lives. Others are processing grief, walking through the pain of losing a loved one, letting the rhythm of footsteps gradually ease the weight of sorrow. Many are at crossroads in their lives, ending relationships, changing careers, retiring from decades of work, and they seek the clarity that extended solitude and physical exertion sometimes provide. Some come because friends or family members walked and returned transformed, their enthusiasm contagious, and some, perhaps more than would admit it, come simply because it seems like an interesting thing to do, a challenge unlike any they have attempted before. What unites this diverse multitude is the experience itself. The Camino, regardless of why you start walking it, tends to become something more than expected. The simplicity of life on the path, reduced to the basic concerns of food, shelter, and forward motion, strips away the distractions of ordinary existence. The daily rhythm of walking, resting, eating, sleeping, walking again, creates a meditative state that many find profoundly calming. The community of fellow pilgrims, strangers who become friends over shared meals and shared miles, provides connection and support. And then there is the Camino's peculiar magic, hard to describe but widely reported. The right person appearing at the right moment with exactly the advice needed. The thought or memory surfacing during a quiet stretch of path that suddenly clarifies years of confusion. The unexpected beauty of a sunset, or a village church, or a simple meal that moves the traveler to tears. Pilgrims speak of these experiences with a kind of wondering gratitude, aware that they sound somewhat mystical, but unable to deny what they felt. There is a phrase that pilgrims use. The Camino provides. It means that somehow, whatever you need appears when you need it. A water fountain, just when your bottle runs empty. A friendly face on a day when loneliness threatens to overwhelm. A bed in an albergue that seemed full. An insight that solves a problem you've been carrying for years. Skeptics might attribute this to confirmation bias, to the human tendency to remember the fortunate coincidences and forget the times when nothing convenient appeared. And perhaps they're right, but the experience of walking the Camino often feels like something more than coincidence, like participating in a story that is somehow being written as you walk it. The physical transformation is easier to document. Bodies change over the course of hundreds of kilometers of walking. Feet toughen, leg muscles strengthen, cardiovascular systems become more efficient. People who began the Camino overweight or out of shape often finish it lean and fit, able to walk 20 or 30 kilometers without significant fatigue. The body adapts to the demands placed upon it, and the adaptation itself feels like an accomplishment, proof that change is possible, that the self is not fixed, but malleable. Closing reflections. And so the walking continues. 1,000 years after a hermit saw strange lights over a hillside, pilgrims still follow the path he discovered. The reasons have changed, the beliefs have shifted, but something essential remains. The human need to move through landscape on foot, to mark important transitions with physical journeys, to seek meaning through motion. This is older than Christianity, older than any organized religion, as ancient as our species itself. Long before anyone dreamed of Santiago de Compostela, human beings were walking to places of power, drawn by instincts we still feel but can no longer name. The Camino de Santiago offers something increasingly rare in our hyper-connected, instantly gratified world: slowness. To walk 800 kilometers at the pace of your own 2 feet is to experience time differently than most of us ever do in modern life. Days become simple. The concerns that seemed so pressing back home gradually fade, replaced by more immediate questions. Will my feet hold out for another 20 kilometers? What will be on the menu at tonight's hostel? Will the weather hold? There is something healing in this simplicity, this reduction of existence to its essential elements. There is also community, In an age when loneliness has reached epidemic proportions, when we are more connected electronically, but more isolated physically than ever before, the Camino offers genuine human contact. You walk beside strangers, share meals with them, hear their stories, and tell your own. Develop bonds that somehow transcend the usual barriers of age, nationality, language, and background. The greeting Buen Camino, exchanged 100 times a day between passing pilgrims, is both a blessing and a recognition. We are in this together, all of us walking the same ancient path toward the same distant destination. And there is beauty, abundant and varied. The snow-capped peaks of the Pyrenees at dawn, the endless gold of wheat, fields rippling under a Meseta sky, the green intimacy of Galician forests, where the path runs between ancient oaks and the air smells of earth and eucalyptus, small Romanesque churches standing lonely in the fields, their bells unchanged for 800 years, great cathedrals rising like stone hymns to the sky, the Atlantic crashing against the cliffs of Finisterre, wild and eternal. This beauty is free, available to anyone willing to walk toward it, demanding nothing but attention and gratitude. Perhaps that is what the Camino offers most of all. Attention. An invitation to pay attention to the world, to your own body, to the thoughts that surface when you stop running from them. The path does not promise answers to your questions or solutions to your problems. It promises only the walk itself, one foot in front of the other, morning after morning, until the towers of Santiago rise at last on the horizon. What you find along the way is your own affair. The Camino provides the space. You provide the meaning. People often ask pilgrims who have returned from the Camino what they learned, what wisdom they brought back from their journey. The answers are rarely satisfying, at least not in the way that questions about lessons learned hope to be satisfied. Some speak of patience, of learning to trust that the next village will appear when it appears, that the blisters will heal, that the rain will eventually stop. Others speak of gratitude, of discovering how little they actually need to be happy, how a simple meal and a clean bed can feel like paradise after a long day of walking. Many speak of connection, of the deep bonds formed with people they met only briefly, but will remember forever. But perhaps the truest answer is that the Camino teaches nothing that can be easily put into words. It teaches through experience, through the accumulation of steps and days and moments, through the slow wearing down of resistance, and the gradual building up of something new. You cannot explain the Camino to someone who has not walked it any more than you can explain the taste of wine to someone who has never drunk it. The knowledge is in the walking, in the being there, in the doing of the thing itself. The sun is setting now over the Atlantic, as it has set every evening since the world began. Pilgrims are gathering at Finisterre, watching the great star descend toward the dark water, continuing a ritual that predates all the churches and cathedrals built along this ancient way. Tomorrow they will begin the journey home, carrying with them whatever the Camino has given, changed in ways they may not yet fully understand. And tomorrow, back in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, new pilgrims will take their first steps across the Pyrenees, beginning their own long walk to the end of the world. The cycle continues, unbroken for over 1,000 years. Each generation discovers the path anew, adding their footprints to the countless millions that have come. before. The stones worn smooth by feet that walked centuries ago will be worn smoother still by feet that walk tomorrow. The bells that rang for medieval pilgrims will ring for pilgrims yet unborn. This continuity is perhaps the Camino's greatest gift. The knowledge that we are part of something larger than ourselves, a river of humanity flowing toward a common destination. Each of us unique, and yet all of us connected. The path is always there, waiting. It has waited 1,000 years already. It will wait 1,000 more. And somewhere, right now, someone is taking their first step onto it, beginning a journey that will change their life in ways they cannot yet imagine. Thank you for walking with me tonight. If this journey has left you feeling peaceful, perhaps a little sleepy, then the Camino has worked its quiet magic once again. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with open roads, distant horizons, and the gentle rhythm of footsteps carrying you toward rest. Buen camino, my friends. Buen camino.